Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
A chance to show off all of the local community has to offer.
Starting to set the foundation for being able to ask these more advanced questions.
Just this very special moment in Browns and in St. Louis sports history.
Today on Spotlight, how the St. Louis Browns shocked the baseball world by beating the New York Yankees in 1944. Plus, it's a fall tradition that's been around for 30 years and it's happening next weekend. And then what your social media activities really say about you. But first, a best-selling author writes a novel that gives St. Louis a starring role. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
Famous in a Small Town is about the family you're born with and the family you choose.
This is a story that follows two very different women from two very different eras.
Missouri native Wade Rouse writes about fierce, independent women, much like his grandmother, Viola Shipman, whose name he uses to pen his novels.
Yeah, my grandmother was everything to me growing up. She was my friend. And there was something that resonated because I saw how poorly she was treated often in our little town. And so this is my thank you to her.
With a wink and a nod to Missouri's Mark Twain, Rouse's newest novel features St. Louis schoolteacher Becky Thatcher and familiar landmarks of his former hometown. Why did you feel strongly about making St. Louis a centerpiece with your main characters?
I say every single novel I write is a love letter to a place that I love. So I'm a writer that has to come from a wellspring of inspiration, and setting is a huge part of that. You know, I like setting to be as big a character as my characters in my books. St. Louis is one of them, Michigan is one of them.
Becky and her BFF flee the big city to spend a summer in northern Michigan. Becky encounters an older woman who owns a general store.
Cherry Mary Jackson, who's an 80-year-old owner of the Very Cherry General Store in northern Michigan, and at the age of 15, she illegally enters Michigan's cherry pit spitting championship and spits that pit further than any of the other men, and also enters the Guinness Book of World Record, which makes her famous in her small town, but often not loved or appreciated. And she lives much of her life not by societal rules and pays a little bit of a price for that. And she's always believed, she's the third generation that's owned this general store, she's always believed that it will be a woman that comes along in her lifetime that will take over her store and also beat her cherry record. But she's had a son who's had a son, and she doesn't know at the age of 80 when that's going to happen. And along comes Becky Thatcher, a 40-year-old elementary school teacher from St. Louis, Missouri, who's only followed the rules of society and has nothing to show for it at the age of 40, and goes on a girls' trip with her best friend to northern Michigan, gets a little bit drunk, wanders up to that cherry pit spitting contest, and blows a pit further than Mary ever did. And Mary thinks, this is who I've waited for my entire life.
So Viola Shipman is your pen name. Why have you used your grandmother's name as a pseudonym?
She protected me and loved me fiercely and unconditionally and told me that it was okay to be different, it was okay to be unique, to be anything that I dreamed of. My grandmother volunteered at the local library even though she never finished high school. She pushed books in my hands. She taught me the importance of education, and that she never had an option.
Right.
And she wanted me to have an option. Yeah. And she was an incredible Southern oral storyteller. She would start stories and ask me to continue them, and we went back and forth. This is my thank you to her. People walk in, even 50 years when I'm gone, and they say my grandmother's name. I believe in this ripple effect of kindness. She was a good woman, and if you're good, you don't know the impact you have on others.
To find out about Wade's Facebook Live show he does every Thursday to connect with his readers, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
They are the best-selling authors and all of your favorite genres. For in-depth, one-on-one interviews, go to hecmedia.org.
History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, president of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis. On October 1st, 1944, the St. Louis Browns shocked the baseball world by beating the New York Yankees to win the American League pennant. Public historian Adam Kloppe tells us about their one and only pennant win.
First in shoes, first in booze, last in the American League. For much of the first half of the 20th century, you could use this statement to describe St. Louis. First in shoes because this was a major shoe manufacturing hub. First in booze because of the Anheuser-Busch Brewery and the other successful breweries that called St. Louis home. And last in the American League because St. Louis was home to two professional baseball teams, the mighty St. Louis Cardinals of the National League and the St. Louis Browns in the American League, who often finished near the cellar. They just weren't a very good franchise. But that all almost changed in 1944. Of course, in 1944, World War II was going on. A lot of baseball players were off serving their country. In fact, in 1944, only 40% of the players that had been available in 1941 were still available to be playing. That's how many players were off serving in the military during the war. And so the Browns had put together this team of kind of wily veterans, guys that were sort of past military age, some guys who had been dismissed from other teams for bad behavior, drinking, or fighting with teammates or something like that. And they put together this team that ended up being pretty competitive unexpectedly. And on the last day of the 1944 season, after a real back and forth battle for who's going to win the American League, the Browns find themselves tied with the Detroit Tigers. And the Detroit Tigers are playing, at that point, the worst team, the Washington Senators, and the Browns are playing the New York Yankees, one of the greatest franchises in sports. The Browns take the field on that last day of the season in Sportsman's Park, and they immediately fall behind by 2 runs to the Yankees. And everyone's like, oh no, here we go again. The Browns aren't gonna win. And then an outfielder by the name of Chet Labs ties the game in the 4th inning, hitting a 2-run home run. And right after that, the scorekeeper changes the score to final in the Detroit-Washington game. Detroit had lost to Washington. So all the Browns need to do is win, and they're gonna win the American League pennant. And they come up with some heroics. Chet Labs hits another home run. A different Brown hits a home run. They end up beating the Yankees 5-2 and winning the American League pennant. And people are so excited. This is the first time in Browns history that they're winning the American League. They're going to the World Series. And of course, their opponent in the 1944 World Series is the St. Louis Cardinals, who had won the last 3 National League pennants, and at the time were one of the best teams in baseball, led by Stan Musial. And the Browns, they're more competitive than people think, but they do end up losing that World Series to the Cardinals. And they never repeat as American League champions again. And in 1953, they end up moving to Baltimore. So it's the one season where the Browns win the American League is in 1944. And it's just this very special moment in Browns and in St. Louis sports history.
Next week on History Spotlight, the first African-American municipal judge in St. Louis.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
The Best of Missouri Market is the first weekend in October, and we've been having the Best of Missouri Market here at the Missouri Botanical Garden for more than 30 years. It's a wonderful fall tradition that gives you a chance to shop local vendors from throughout the state of Missouri for all kinds of wonderful handcrafted products. There's lots of food, cheeses, produce, there's local artwork you can purchase, craft goods, jewelry, there's candles. For adults, we do have cocktails, beer, and wine to sample and to purchase. For the first time this year, we will have a food court with food trucks so you can have a bite to eat from local favorites like Grace and Eaton 3. And then for the kids, we have a whole kids corner where there's pumpkin painting, our pumpkin patch, a petting zoo, all of your favorite children's activities that we offer each year. The Missouri Botanical Garden has been here in St. Louis since 1859, and we're very connected to the local community. So the Best of Missouri Market is just a chance to show off all of the local community has to offer. And the Best of Missouri Market is also one of your last chances to see Chihuly in the Garden. Chihuly in the Garden is here through October 15th. And it is a spectacular exhibit if you haven't gotten to see it yet. There are 20 different sculptures throughout the garden. Each are made of thousands of pieces of hand-blown glass from world-renowned glass artist Dale Chihuly. It is the perfect multi-generational event, so you can bring grandma and grandpa, bring your kids. There's shopping, there's food, there's drinks, there's crafts for the kids, other children's activities. There is something for everyone to do here. The Best of Missouri Market is October 6th through 8th. On Friday it is open from noon to 8 p.m. Saturday and Sunday it is open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can get more information by visiting mobot.org.
We're to enjoy hip-hop culture in St. Louis later on Spotlight.
What do your social media posts, likes, comments, views, searches, scrolling, or whatever you're doing say about you? Experts usually break down social media users' activities into two categories, active or passive.
When we think of active social media use, people tend to think of things like making posts or commenting on other people's posts. Passive social media use has been conceptualized by things like just scrolling, just watching videos, looking at memes.
But a new study at Washington University in St. Louis is changing that, suggesting a new way to better understand social media use.
Social media and mental health and well-being is something that people have been interested in for quite some time. There's very little consensus about exactly how to measure passive versus active use. Maybe there's just more to it than that.
Allison Tuck is first author of the study and a PhD candidate in clinical psychology and arts and sciences.
What we did here was we figured out how are people using it. What surprised us the most was that active versus passive social media use really did not seem like the way to classify this data. When the data came back, we were able to analyze it, apply some fancy statistics, and long story short was find that there are ultimately 4 different categories of social media use.
Essentially, Tuck and team created a new tool to evaluate social media use. The 4 categories provide insights about behavior traits and personality. First on the list, the belief-based category of use.
Belief-based social media use seems to be all about using social media to feel or reaffirm negative beliefs. So this is where we're seeing things like doom scrolling, like actively looking up and engaging with content that you disagree with.
Then there's consumption-based use.
That's where we're seeing a lot of our scrolling, watching videos, looking at memes. It's consuming.
And next, image-based social media use.
Trying to make a favorable social image on social media or monitoring the social image that you may be making.
Lastly, there's comparison-based use.
All about using social media to compare yourself to others or to your own past.
The scale can be used to analyze behaviors on any social media platform that allows users to create profiles, connect with other users, and view lists of connected users, such as Facebook, Instagram, X, Snapchat, Reddit, and TikTok.
What we are trying to do is help people understand how they are using social media, with the ultimate goal being how can we start helping people engage in healthier versus less healthy types of social media use.
Tuck says it's important to continue investigating the different types of social media use. She's already started a new study.
Now we are really starting to look at when we tell people to engage in each of these 4 types of use, how do their emotions change? But it also told us a lot about what these 4 different types of social media use are associated with. So for example, belief-based social media use is associated with lower life satisfaction. Comparing yourself, that we see repeatedly is associated with greater depressive symptomology, lower self-esteem, a whole host of negative personality traits. We're starting to ask questions about how are people specifically using these 4 different types of social media to influence their emotions. And so we're really just starting to set the foundation, lay the groundwork for being able to ask these more advanced questions.
Go to hecmedia.org for the arts and authors,
Completely accidental because I never set out to write a book.
science and history, culture and community,
Considered to be the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi.
education, films,
Finding the coin places the site firmly in the 13th century.
what's happening now around St. Louis, and more. See for yourself at hecmedia.org.
St. Louis architecture is so much, it is so varied. Well, the arch is super important because it is such a simplistic symbol of the birth of our country, right? And architecturally it's incredible because it was designed about 25 years before people think it was, right? Like it looks like it was built in the 1960s, but it was designed in the 1940s. So it was very forward thinking at the time, which makes it incredibly significant. So much more to St. Louis than the arch. So when looking at St. Louis architecture, it's kind of great to think about the idea that we just kind of pulled our city out of the ground, right? The clay for the brick, the limestone for the foundations, and the people that came here from all over the world to build our city. So this is the Wainwright Building by Louis Sullivan, one of the most important architects in American architectural history, and it's his most important building, and it's considered the first skyscraper. When we talk about the Wainwright Building and we say it's the first skyscraper, usually someone laughs because they're like, there's no way. And yes, it was not the first tall building, and it's not the tallest building of its time at that, even of the 1890s. But what it's different and what makes it the first skyscraper is it's the first building to look tall. It articulates its height, is how we say it. You know, the form that Louis Sullivan came up with could be stretched another 80 stories, right, and be the same form, and that was really radically different. What's also significant about the building is its use of St. Louis materials, right? Red terracotta, they're using the material that you see everywhere in the red bricks, you know, all throughout St. Louis. And so it's really symbolic of that. And even though it has a lot of carvings and some really great detailing on it, it is definitely leaning towards modern, and it has much less detailing than other buildings of its time would have had. So this is the old post office, and it was actually designed in the 1870s, right after the Civil War. The federal government built several of these around the country as a kind of a show of might, right? They put these big federal buildings in lots of big cities like Philadelphia and New York. Of those 6 that they built, only 2, this is the only one that's left. So it's really significant, not just locally, but nationally. The guy that designed it, his name is Alfred Mullett, and he was working for the US government, and he designed these buildings. And there are only 2 examples of his work in this style left. One is the Executive Building in Washington, D.C., and this one. And so it's really, really significant. It's actually listed on one of the top 10 most significant buildings in the country. And they started excavating to put this building on the site. Not too far down, they actually ran into a big area of quicksand. And they had to adjust for that. And so the way they did that is they sunk over 4,000 pine logs into the quicksand to get a firm thing, poured concrete on top of that, and the building has not settled or moved since. So we're at the Soulard Market, one of the most famous places in St. Louis. Everybody hears about it, but it's not a building that a lot of people know about. The actual history of it, how it got to be here, and it's a building with a huge history. This land was donated to the city of St. Louis in the early 1800s by Julia Soulard, who owned this land. She donated it with the caveat that it will always be a public market, which is why St. Louis has a public market still, all these years later. And it's considered one of the oldest farmers markets west of the Mississippi. Well, the original was just a bunch of people with horse carts. And then there were, kind of a more ramshackle type structure. Also, the site that it's on, this was hit by a tornado in 1896. An F4 tornado swept through here, doing massive damage, flattened the market. And the building that we have now was the building that was rebuilt after after that tornado. 90% of Soulard is that great St. Louis red brick. And while I'm not quite sure where this brick comes from, it is interesting how it sits within the neighborhood and they used yellow brick, yellows and browns, so it does kind of set itself apart from the red brick of the neighborhood. So we're over here in kind of a residential area of Soulard. I mean, everybody connects Soulard to the market, but it's actually a great place to see some of the earliest examples of architecture in St. Louis that we still have left behind from those early people that came here. One of the great things about architecture in Soulard and seeing these homes is to think about what happened inside of them. I mean, these things, the buildings behind me predate the Civil War. So to think that, you know, all the changes our country went through, people were inside them talking about those changes, right? They were experiencing life, and all the changes we've seen in the modern era all happened within these walls. So most of the people in Soulard would have lived in multi-family homes like the ones behind me. There would have been several families living in different apartments. They're called flats. Some of them would have been, you would access it from the front, and then the other apartments you would access actually through something called a mouse hole. And this is a mouse hole, and this would have given the inhabitants of the building access to the backyard and to the upper floor apartments. And so I love to encourage people to just walk the neighborhoods, even if it's not your neighborhood, you know, walk it, look at the buildings, and think about the people that came, the people that built them. You know, we have so many buildings built by hand, and look at the legacy left behind by those artisans. Don't forget to look up in your own city.
Scan the QR code on your screen to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
The culture, hip-hop, and contemporary art in the 21st century here at the St. Louis Art Museum coincides with this year's 50th anniversary of hip-hop.
We are so excited to have this exhibition here, celebrating and exploring all of the ways that hip hop over the course of 50 years has truly impacted contemporary art.
We're excited that this exhibition includes almost 30% of local artists from both Baltimore and St. Louis, as this is a collaborative project with the Baltimore Museum of Art.
We've been working on it for over a year. And these kind of exhibitions, they take a long time to develop. And one of the things that's so important in the developing of an exhibition such as this is that we spent a lot of time talking to people in the community.
Thinking about community, especially as it relates to music in St. Louis, we knew that it would be critical to engage many voices. So there was a polyphonic approach that we took with this exhibition that included a global and regional advisory group. We knew that we as a curatorial team could not work in silo, especially with a subject like hip hop. So to include voices and to have stories of those told and celebrated through the exhibition is a wonderful opportunity to showcase St. Louis community.
So this exhibition really primarily features objects that were made in the last 23 years, hence the 21st century. So throughout the exhibition, you'll see works by emerging artists, by established artists, you'll see fashion, video, sculpture, painting, really all delving into the ways in which hip hop impacted and influenced these artists and their practices.
There are also works that are looking at everyday hip hop style. As we are thinking about wigs, as we're thinking about do-rags, gold chains, and grills, all moments that have made hip-hop culture, as it relates to fashion, memorable, special, and iconic to so many.
So one of the key elements of this exhibition is to showcase the many ways that hip-hop culture impacts everyday life. And you'll see these elements throughout the show. And it's not just through the music. That was something that was really important to us because hip hop is not monolithic. It is many, many different things. It's music, it's dance, it's graffiti, it's all of these elements that you can see across the different objects in every section of the exhibition.
One of the sections in the exhibition is called Tribute, and we're thinking about a canonization of hip-hop artists. So there you will see artists like Little Kim, Jay-Z, Biggie, but we're also thinking about our local community. So Smino, for example, and of course we couldn't have a show without Nelly. So there are impressions of our local hip-hop history and community included as well. You can see the culture, hip-hop and contemporary art in the 21st century on view at the St. Louis Art Museum from August the 19th through January the 1st, 2024.
For more information on the exhibition and on the museum, please visit the website slam.org.
Meet St. Louis's Brock Seals, who perfectly embodies both hip-hop and visual arts.
Hey, oh well, I'm on the phone like Alex Bell, just drinking clientele, OJ and White Zinfandel. No, this ain't YSL, this that new art by sales.
I haven't been creating visual art as long as I've been creating music, but I've always had an eye for art. I didn't know how to use certain tools to express my ideas. So once I learned how to use those tools is when I really became like a full-fledged visual artist. I just kind of create simultaneously between the two. I'm hopping back and forth. While I create, I listen to music, whether it's, you know, some music that somebody's made or whether it's some music I've made. I grew up in Jennings, Missouri. I went to Florissant Valley Community College. I was initially interested in fashion, but they didn't have a fashion program. So I was like, what am I gonna do? And I was always feeling like, okay, art seemed like a cool thing. You know, I've always had an eye for it. Yeah, I took my first art class, and kind of the rest is history. Here I am now. I've been doing music a little bit all my life. I started doing music in about 5th or 6th grade.
I'm so focused, whipping doses. You subscribe, 100 poses. Black Moses when I vibe. I keep paint like it's ammo. I just flip a bando.
I have an old soul. My first music project that I put out by myself was called Young Man, Old Soul. So it was just reflecting who I am as an artist, what are my influences. Like I listened to a lot of music from the 70s, like soul, R&B music. And that's because like my mom, like growing up with her, I would try to listen to rap and it was not going. In her car, she played nothing but old school music. So I just kept that influence. And I'm still influenced by that today when I make music, when I create art. So it's just always with me. Or whether it's a beat that I plan on writing to, you know, I just paint to it, listen to it. I may put the brush down, write something down, or I may just be freestyling while I'm painting. It's just like always at the same time. One inspires the other inspires the other. The art, I can, you know, paint something and it be done right then and there. With music, sometimes I write it and then go record it, so it's like a two-step process. Or sometimes I'm just in the studio and I just do it while I'm there.
So my timepiece Gucci, I hate how they use the term artist so loosely. Need time to myself, so I just chill work.
My style, I would say it's expressive, it's colorful, it's reflective of me.
It's somewhere secluded. I cannot go outside, yeah. Gotta secure the bag. I got your in
the best piece of advice I've been given is stay humble. Practicing that right now.
Next week, meet the first African-American municipal judge for City Court number 2. Plus a community event where bands play on front porches. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.